So today is the 10th day of Elul, the Yortzeit of Reb Pinchas of Koretz, and the 13th of September. Pinchas of Koretz. He was one of the Baal Shem Tov's direct students, and there's a lot of interesting stories with him. He was known for his measure of truth, that if he would come in from the rain and he would be drenched, and somebody would ask him, is it raining outside? He would say, when I was outside, it rained. I don't know. That's one of the stories about him. But there's a lot more. It took him 22 years, they said, to capture the essence of truth, of never saying anything that is not true. Okay. Now, we finally come to this this topic of multiplicity in creation. So we're in Shorish Mitzvos Tefillah, chapter 19, in Derech Mitzvosecha. V'chach al derech mashal yuvan gam ken lemala. In the same way that wisdom in us creates the possibility of the multiplicity of words that we utter, so wisdom above. For we know that there are basically an infinite number of creations, of creatures that God created. And each one is separate, distinct from all the others. So in the same way, and so now he's giving us the theory behind this whole thing. And the reason for this multiplicity is because of what we just said about us and speech above, that wisdom allows there to be many, many different permutations. So now when somebody hears this, so he says, what do you mean, many different permutations? How many permutations can you make out of 22 letters? Well, it depends how many words you want to utter, how long the name is. Basically, an infinite number. You could go on and on forever. But that's the idea. In the same way that a human can speak an infinite number of passages. You know, there's, even if you just go to 500 letters, which is what there is, maybe not 500 letters, 500 words, which is what there is on an A4 page. How many pages can you write? So there's more than there are particles in the universe. There's so many. Whether it's in English or Hebrew, it doesn't matter. You're doing 26 in English to the 500th power, or the 499th power, the 500th power. It's a number that has no end. Because of that, there's an infinite number of variations of stories and things you can say and tell and write, and there's no end to it. In the same way, it's as if the divine speech has the same. Where did we get this power? We got it from Hashem. That He also had this ability to make infinite permutations, and they are the life source. These letters, these different permutations, are the life source of everything that is alive and exists. והתחלקות זו של האותיות בשינויי הצירופים על ידי בחינת החוכמה, לפי שחוכמה העילה נקראת ראשית, לכך נשפט למטה בחינת עולם הדיבור, להיות התחלקות האותיות בצירופן, כמו שכתוב בחוכמה יסד ארץ, אבא יסד ברטה. So this is all in wisdom. You just said everything we said, he said in Hebrew. וזהו שכתוב מה רבו מעשיך השם, כולם בחוכמה עשית. And that's what it means when it says how multiple or how many are your actions, God, you have made them all with wisdom. פירוש, meaning, שריבוי ההתחלקות בנבראים, שהוא בא ונמשך מצד ריבוי הצירופים, אותיות הדיבור, כל זהו על ידי החוכמה. Meaning that the multiplicity, the variety of different creations descends and comes down thanks to the multiple and infinite variations of permutations that you can make to the letters. And again, the same idea is that we are creators by virtue of our speech. Again, why did the Torah choose to describe creation as an act of speech? Why couldn't it just say God created? It does, by the way. It says sometimes God created, but it also says God spoke. He said, why use that at all? Why is that the metaphor? Why is that the figurative description of how God brings things into creation? In order to say to us, look at yourself and ask yourself, how many different sentences can I say? An infinite number. Therefore, in the same way, God can make, and He makes through these permutations, as it were. It's not really that the permutations are the life force, but this is the parable. This is how you should look at it. He can make an infinite variety of things through His wisdom. However, but His ontos, He Himself, is far detached from that wisdom. The wisdom is something that He possesses. It's not Him. He Himself is completely separate from that. He is one. He is not. He is singular, as we said. It's only His wisdom that allows that to come. So somebody will say, so what is the relationship between His wisdom and Himself? Isn't that the same thing? Why are you taking it out of Him? Or what are you doing?
That's what
Okay. But to give a full answer, we have to get into things that were written after the Tzemach Tzedek. The whole.
was Simpson again?
Yeah. First of all, there's a leap for sure.
Yeah,
there's a leap from him to his wisdom.
Yes.
Of course, there's a quantum leap there.
Yes.
But in order to understand whether wisdom is just something outside the God Himself, or whether it's something that has more of an intrinsic belonging to God, this we would have to get into a topic that he doesn't discuss here enough.
Fine.
Is discussed in what we call the famous Hemshech, meaning the famous series of discourses, of essays, written by his grandson, the Rebbe Rashab, called Ayin Beis. Ayin Beis, it was because it was in the year Tafresh Ayin Beis, which is 1912, and over 3 years, basically, from 1912 until 1914, he gave about 150 essays. He also spoke them, so they're also sometimes called discourses, but really they're essays. He wrote them, and there he discusses this question. It's not a simple question to answer. I mean, in the end, the reason I feel comfortable leaving it like this is because he's going to say something. He's not going to leave us completely in the dark. But that's the question, right? That is God His wisdom? Is it the same thing? And the answer is no, it's not the same thing. What exactly is the relationship? We'll see. Or at least a little bit of it we'll see. But the point is that from wisdom comes the myriad beings, creatures, everything that God creates. In the same way, and again, you have to look at yourself.
Sounds like duality.
No, because let's look at ourselves. We don't think that what we are saying is a duality with us. We don't see it that way.
No, we don't.
We see that
No,
I am
it's
singular,
integral,
I'm singular,
Yeah.
and somehow, I don't
You can do
understand
this.
this,
Yes,
I
yes.
can put out an infinite number of words,
Yeah, okay.
and variations of words, and sentences,
It's not a
and
duality
stories.
in our,
We don't feel that it's a duality. In the same way, by Hashem, it's not duality. On the other hand, one would ask, what are we? Is our speech intrinsic to us? So by the sages, it definitely is. By the way, by the Greeks, it's not. The sages took this four-tiered system, taxonomy, that the Greeks had, which is the inanimate, the vegetable, the animal. And by the Greeks, the fourth level was the thinker. And they switched it. They replaced thinker with speaker. They said that is more intrinsic to us than our thought even. Our ability to speak is more intrinsic to man than his thinking. And the reason for that today is obvious, because animals think. There's no question that they think. They think in a rudimentary way maybe, but they think. They just can't speak. That's where they're lacking. And even if they can express themselves through sign language, like some great apes can, it's not speech. Without speech, without this strange quality that we have, there is no man. That's what sets us apart, and that's a very important change that the sages did from the Greek system. In any case, so speech is, maybe we don't feel that it's dualistic because it's so intrinsic to us. Okay, could be. Still, I wouldn't say, even if this is my description, I still wouldn't say that I, Moshe Ganut, am a speaker, unless you're a speaker of the house. I don't know what that even means. But I would never say that. I feel that I am something that is distinct of my expression. And yet I don't think that my expression is something entirely outside of me. Sometimes people do, like they'll say, I said that, really? I said something like that? How could I have said? But that just means that there's cognitive dissonance from certain things that we say. Maybe we did say them, maybe we didn't. But not from the very fact that we speak. We don't feel cognitive dissonance from that. So, by Hashem also, what exactly is this wisdom? How is it related to Him? In the end, it's not a duality. It's something that He creates in some way. It has some intrinsic relationship with Him, but He has to create it. There has to be a leap in order to get there. And now He's going to tell us that this is and this is where the philosophers, he doesn't mean here philosophers as in philosophy today, he means philosophy of nature. Science used to be called philosophy of nature. He's talking about the natural philosophers. Natural philosophy was science before 1840. 1840 was the first year that I found that a English book uses the word science. Until then it was natural philosophy. So these natural philosophers, this is where they make a mistake about the human mind. ותיארו בו יתברך מציאות וגדר חוכמה וקראום חוכמת אלוקות. And they describe the human mind, and they say the human mind has intrinsic to it wisdom, meaning this ability to create speech. And they call this the divine wisdom. Where is this exactly called divine wisdom? I'm not 100% clear. I don't know the history of this. וגם לא הונח להם עניין התהוות הריבוי מן האחדות. And because of this, it didn't sit well with them, this idea of the multiplicity coming out of the singularity. דכיוון שהוא יתברך יחיד ומיוחד, איך נתהווה הריבוי והשינוי בנבראים, שכל אחד ואחד משונה מזולתו. Now if you say that God is the same way, that the wisdom is part of His being, it is maybe, that's how you define Him even, then how can you say that He's singular? And if you don't say that, then you're stuck with the old question, which is how does the multiplicity come out of the singularity? אבל באמת בחשכה יתהלך, but really they walk in darkness, ולא ידעו ולא יבינו כי סיבת התחלקות בין הנבראים ומחמת שינוי הצירופים של אותיות מידותיו יתברך כנ"ל. And they don't understand that the reason for the distinction, the separation between the creatures, that they're different. I mean, maybe you could have many creatures that are the same thing, exactly the same thing, and then you would say, okay, so there's many of them somehow. I don't know exactly how you would distinguish them, but maybe there's many of them. Maybe in time they're separated. The one exists now and then the other and so on. Maybe like electrons and something like that. Then you would still say, okay, maybe there is singularity here. But the moment you have them existing at the same time in separate spaces, distinct from one another because of their separate spaces, then how do you reconcile this with God's singularity? And it says, because they didn't understand that the multiplicity comes out of God's measures, meaning something that came out of Him. He has to bring it out of Him. And the source of that multiplicity, is by the wisdom. אבל עצמותו ומהותו יתברך מרומם ומתנשא למעלה מגדר חוכמה, ולא יושג בשום חוכמה כלל. And so it's improper to call it divine wisdom. It's not the right name, because when you say divine wisdom, what they meant to say at least, I don't know exactly who he's referring to. I imagine that he's also referring to many Jewish philosophers of nature, or Jewish philosophers that use natural philosophy. The moment that you attribute the wisdom to God's essence, then you're missing the point. That the wisdom has to be separate in some way. It's not the same thing as God. It's not a synonym. You can't say divine wisdom is godliness. To say it another way, and here we're treading on very thin ice, because it can easily break under my feet as I say this. I have to say it exactly perfectly. To think that by having wisdom I become divine myself is a problem. It's not the right way to think about it. Since there's still a gap. And in the Tanya, he discusses this in length, I believe in chapter 20, 23, 24. What does it mean that Oraita v'Kutchabrichu Chadu? What does it mean that, we also saw this, by the way, here. The Torah and God are one thing. What do we mean by that? If you say Torah and God are one thing, what do you mean to say? Do you mean to say the wisdom of the Torah? In that case, aren't you saying, isn't the Zohar saying, the Zohar that says this, the Torah, Oraita and Kutchabrichu are one thing? Doesn't it mean then that God is wisdom? Right? So the answer is no. Why? Because, and again, this is very delicate, you have to define it well, because it doesn't say God himself, it says Kutchabrichu. Kutchabrichu, the Holy Blessed One, does not refer to God himself, even though we saw that all the names, but this is really a connotation. When you say, the connotations don't necessarily refer to God himself. It's not like the 7 names that are not erased, the sacred names. The connotations, they describe some aspect of godliness. And so, the Torah is an aspect of godliness. What do we mean still? So it's not that simple. Why? Because we have other places where sages say that I put myself into the Torah. He says that the first word, Anochi, which is really a Hebraicized form of an Egyptian word. How do you say I in Egyptian? Anoch. Anoch, literally. And so Anochi also means I in Hebrew. They took the Torah takes the Egyptian word and uses it. So the sages say this word is really an acronym for Ana Nafshik Taviti Avit. I have taken myself and written myself into the Torah. What does that mean? It means that beyond the wisdom of the Torah, not the wisdom of the Torah itself, beyond the wisdom of the Torah, God has contracted himself into these letters. Does it mean that if you possess the wisdom, you have unleashed or opened up or come in contact with the infinite inside? No, not necessarily. There's first of all, there's other ways to do it. It could be, for instance, and this is very important about learning Torah, even if you don't understand what the Torah is saying. I'm talking about the written Torah, the 5 books of Moses. Even if you don't understand what it's saying, you should still read it in Hebrew, in the original Hebrew. Why? Because we understand that here, what's our measure? Our measure is, are you performing the mitzvah of learning Torah? So when it comes to anything else, the answer is usually no, because if you don't understand what you're saying, if you don't understand what the sages are saying, you're not performing the mitzvah because you don't understand. There's no wisdom in it. There's nothing. You're just saying words that are empty for you. But when it comes to the 5 books of Moses, that text, we say that yes, you've performed the mitzvah. You've performed the commandment to study Torah. Why? Because the Torah itself already contains Hashem in some way. Not necessarily through the wisdom, because I don't have to be wise. I don't have to understand the wisdom to come in contact with the godliness that's inside the Torah.
So that almost means that the wisdom is intrinsic.
That the wisdom is something, but it's not God himself.
No.
It's not God himself. Because even if I don't understand what it's saying, even if I have no wisdom, I'm still connecting. Connecting. Okay. This is still God's embodiment as a word in words.
Yes.
Because even by the supernal wisdom, the Zohar says, thought cannot grasp him. There's no thought that can grasp God himself. So here too, wisdom is not God himself. And wisdom for him is the same thing as action. They're both separate from him. So it's a very... Now, if I look at a human being, would I say his wisdom is himself? For instance, now there's this whole direction that people want to upload consciousness to make it more immortal. Yeah. So what will you need to capture from the person? Yeah. What would you need to capture? Is it just patterns of behavior and speech? For instance, all AI does today all that artificial intelligence does today is mimic patterns. That's all it does. It's really good.
Yeah.
It's so good
Yeah.
that it's astounding. But it's just repeating a pattern. It's just doing it really well. Is that who I am? Meaning, if you would document all my behavior, all my...
I hope not.
So the person would say,
in other words,
but you're missing the essence.
That's not my essence.
You're missing my essence.
Yeah.
It's true that many times my essence comes out through my behavior, but that's not all I am.
No.
And so, in the same way, whether it's my wisdom, it's my actions, it's my expressions, it's my speech, whatever it is, it still doesn't fully capture me. There's something else there. And that thing is undocumentable. It's ungraspable. And that's what the Zohar means to say, that even thought cannot grasp it. So even if we didn't document my expressions, we would document my brain waves.
Yeah, right.
That would still not be me. Because it's still just a way in which I express myself in the world. Who am I? That is something that cannot be fully defined, neither by man nor by God.
Yeah, right.
Now, this is where our belief in human potential really comes to play. Because what are we saying? We're saying that the human being who has a soul, the soul is like a part of God above, the divine soul. And here it has an infinite, ungraspable, undocumentable existence that is beyond everything that we can ever express. And therefore there's infinite potential to the human soul.
Yes.
Just as much. Okay, let's end here. God willing, we're almost at the end of chapter 19. It's a very important chapter.
Yeah.
And we'll continue, God willing, next week. Good Shabbos.